رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. أما بعد، الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. أما بعد, last week we began the Tafseer of Surah Naas, where we discussed about al-musta'ad bihi, seeking refuge, whose refuge we are seeking. We are seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions multiple ayat. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ مَلِكِ النَّاسِ إِلَهِ النَّاسِ, mentioning Himself. So we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is Rabb al-Nas, then Malik al-Nas, Ilah al-Nas. The reason for this, like we mentioned, the fear from the whisper of shaitan is far greater, and because this can lead a person to losing his faith. So the first three ayat was about al-musta'ad bihi, that we are whose refuge we are seeking refuge in Allah. Now before moving on to talk about what we are seeking refuge from, al-musta'ad min, I'd like to mention a few things about the waswasa of shaitan. Now, hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, come to find one hadith which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Sayyid ibn Jubayr radiallahu anhu, mentions from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, that shaitan plants himself right above the heart of Ibn Adam, the human being. And when فَإِذَا سَهَا وَغَفَلَ, when he finds that the human being, he is neglectful, he is heedless, then waswasa, he plants his waswasa, he plants his whisper. And فَإِذَا ذَكَرَ اللَّهَ خَنَسَ, but when he remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he takes a step back. Last week I was mentioning about, that's why it's very important that we always try to stay in a state that we remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We stay conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This will automatically protect a person from the whispers of shaitan. As soon as the human being, he becomes neglectful and he becomes heedless, he leaves an opportunity open for shaitan to attack and to plant his whisper, like we learn from this hadith. And the hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he mentioned, ما منكم من أحد إلا قد به قريب. Explain in من ابن آدم مدن وبكم So Shah was explained before. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So it's mentioning that one hadith Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, he was returning with Hazrat Safiya radiallahu anha at night time, and when he saw two Ansar Sahabi radiallahu anhum, sorry, this I mentioned already. Min sharril waswasil khannas. The word shar refers to something which has been accepted as universally is something bad and evil. And then al-waswas. We normally translate this verse as we seek refuge from the evil of the whisperer who hides. Now, what is al-waswas? Waswas is a word comes from waswasa, it means to whisper. In Arabic, there is also another word used for to whisper, which is hamasa. Now, what is the difference between waswasa and hamasa, or al-muwaswis and hamis? Hamis or hamasa is the whisper that can be good or bad, whereas waswasa is a whisper that can only be bad. So this is the first difference. And secondly, in Arabic, if a word has a repetition of syllables in a word, then this denotes continuity, that it's something which is happening again and again. So in the word waswasa, we have waw and sin, the syllables waw and sin twice. So this denotes that this action is happening again and again. So another example of this is the word zala. So you have the word za, letters za and lam come twice, zala. So that means that shaking which is happening again and again and again. Another example, sila, this refers to a series of mountains, one mountain after another. So waswasa, so two things that we learn immediately from this word is that this is a whisper is from something or someone which is bad, and the act of whispering is happening again and again and again. Another thing to note here is the word, it wasn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say min sharril muwaswis, from the evil of the whisperer. In Arabic, the ismul fa'il was not used. That al-muwaswis means whisperer, but instead the word that was used was min sharril waswas, and from this is a sifatul mubalagha. It's from the, even though from the word itself, you know that is something which is happening again and again, but the pattern upon which this word was brought, it shows that this is constantly, this whispering is happening again and again and again, and excessively. So this is what waswas means. And after this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He brought the sifa, an adjective, al-khannas. Now khannas, what does khannas mean? Is someone who keeps stepping back. Khanis, again, the word khanis was not used, but khannas, again, it was brought on a similar pattern, sifatul mubalagha. Then it shows that this act is happening again constantly. So if this shaitan is constantly stepping back, what does that imply? To constantly step back, he has to constantly step forward. Like I was mentioning, when the human being he remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then shaitan he has to step back. فَإِذَا ذَكَرَ اللَّهَ خَنَسَ. It was mentioned in the hadith, when the human being then shaitan he steps back. But as soon as he stops remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, shaitan finds the opportunity to attack and to plant his whispers. So this is what we understand from khannas. So other words that use the same pattern as this is, he forgives again and again and again. So from this we learn that shaitan he never rests or never takes a break. All the time he never gets tired. All the time we should never think that he's done his job. But all the time we have to be fearful and we have to stay alert from the whispers of shaitan. Let's constantly turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another thing to note, in another place in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions, Inna ibadi laysa laka alayhim sultan. And the surah, it began, Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq. So what does this verse mean? Inna ibadi, my servants, talking, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is addressing shaitan, laysa laka alayhim sultan. You will have no power over them. You will not be able to lead them astray. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions ibad, abd, my slaves. So here again in the beginning of the surah, we began with Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas. we accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is Rabbin Nas. So when we accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as Rabb, automatically we accept in ourselves to be slaves. So when a person he does this and he comes into the slavery of Allah and he lives his life of Allah, then shaitan will not be able to affect this person. Whereas if a person lives a life distant from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then shaitan will be able to affect this person and plant his whisper to this person. Then, very important, on one side we have the spiritual cleansing, that we turn towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we read the surah, but at the same time, by reading the surah, we will spiritually cleanse ourselves, but we have to also physically remember to cleanse ourselves, and by making wudu and keeping ourselves clean. This also plays a major role in staying away from the whispers of shaitan, from shaitan and all these other harms. Then in the next verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ. The being that الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ, again Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions يُوَسْوِسُ, he whispers, فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ, normally translated as in the hearts of men. So even though in the previous ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala he mentions, talks about the waswasa of shaitan, then even after that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again he mentioned الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ, who whispers. Now here the Arabic is used, the verb that is used is فعل المضارع. Now the fi'l, this type of verb, it gives the meaning of that this action is happening now in the present tense and in the future tense. So shaitan, he is whispering, after whispering, it's happening now, and it will continue to happen in the future. And there in the previous verse, a noun was used, min sharri al-waswas, that to show that the occupation of shaitan, what he does is constantly doing and has always been doing, is planting whispers and trying to lead people astray and planting evil thoughts. So alladhi yuwaswisu, he is whispering now and he will continue to do so in the future. Fi suduri nas. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he did not mention fi nas to the people, but he mentioned fi suduri nas, in the translated as in the hearts of men. But sudur, it doesn't mean heart, it means chest. I mentioned this before. The word for heart is qalb. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given access to shaitan access to the chest, but not to the heart. The chest is a place. To give an example, you have a house and surrounding us you have a garden. So say shaitan, he has access to the garden, but he does not have access inside the house. He cannot enter the house. The only way he will be able to enter the house if we open the door. So same way, the whispers of shaitan are hovering around the heart. But once we give him the opportunity and we open the door of the heart, then he will be able to, only then will he be able to enter. But as long as we keep that door closed, then he will not be able to reach the heart. That's why we have to stay with the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and not targets of shaitan. So this was الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ, the hearts of men. And these whispers, they come from مِنَ الْجِنَّةِ وَالنَّاسِ, from the jinn and the people. Now shaitan, the whispers of shaitan, he can use the jinn and nas, he can use people. They can be through in the hearts of human beings. So it's not necessarily that directly we hear their voice, and he uses them as a means to lead us astray. So we have to always stay vigilant and seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this concludes the tafsir of Surah Naas. But like I mentioned in Surah Fatiha, the Surah Fatiha and Surah Naas, Quran, recitation of the Quran, immediately he would start again with the recitation of Surah Fatiha. So the one thing that we learn from this is that the Quran has no bound. Or it's not that a person, we read the Quran once and that's enough, or we began studying the Quran and reached and this is enough. But no, give an example, it's like a sea with no shore. That person will always find, the more we study, the more knowledge, the more we will benefit from the Quran. So this is the Quran, the guide to us. We should constantly read and study the Quran, and more the Quran will open up to us. This is the first thing. And the Surah Naas, like is deeply related to Surah Falaq, is also deeply if you relate to Fatiha. So Fatiha, إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. You're seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in both cases, you're seeking help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a positive perspective from the Hamza. If you look at the wording as well, I mentioned this before, Alhamdulillah, in Surah Naas, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned 3 attributes of himself, qualities. He mentioned himself as Rabbin Nas, Malikin Nas, Ilahin Nas. Similarly, in Surah Fatiha, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes himself as Rabbil Alameen is mentioned, Maliki Yawmiddin, Malik is mentioned, and in the Iyaka na'budu wa Iyaka nasta'in, when we come into the servitude of Allah, this covers the meaning of Ilahin Nas, to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another way, in one, in Surah Fatiha, the verse in Surah Nas, the verse that the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Fatiha collectively, because that type of help is needed collectively, and seeking help, seeking refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from shaitan. This is something that we need as an individual. And then the negative influence is mentioned in Surah Nas, and negative influences are mentioned also in Surah Fatiha. The negative influence that is mentioned in Surah Nas is from shaitan, but it can be through jinn, and it can also be through ins. It can be through the jinnat, and it can also be through human beings. So you could say individual negative influences are mentioned in Surah Nas, and collective negative influences are mentioned in Surah Fatiha, غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ 1 and وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ 2. So, and lastly, if you look at Surah Fatiha, when you divide Surah Fatiha completely in half, then there are 7 verses. And if you look at the middle verse, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ, even if you were to split this in half, you'll come to the conclusion, after studying the first 3 verses, the conclusion of this is إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ إِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. And verses, what are we seeking refuge from? Is all talking about al-mustaqim from the Quran. Ameen wa akhiru da'wah.